One chance, one life, one take.
Hello and welcome to the Dead Funny, Dead Serious podcast. My name is Mitzi. I am your host for this series. This is the 30 End of Life Doulas in 30 Days series. And today our End of Life Doula is Shantell Riley. Hello, Shantell.
Hello.
You are joining us from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. As we get going, your business, just to put it out, is Dignity with Departure. And
Yes.
we are going to have all those links in the show notes so everyone can find you. And let's just go for it. Why did you go into the end of life doula business?
As I tell people constantly, death is what brought me to the end of life doula business. And I experienced death. And to me, it was three different forms, three types of experiences that were death related. And my first experience was my mother. She died in 2009. She had a stroke. And it kind of converted from, not getting oxygen to the brain to bleeding in the brain. So we were in a period of like 24 hours before we were being asked what to do because she wasn't going to make it. And that was a very, very challenging position to be in but it wasn't as challenging because of the fact that she constantly talked about what she didn't want. She didn't want us to do what she referred to as all the extra things. And I did not find out till I was in nursing school what she meant by all the extra things. And that was like all the life sustaining measures. So like, putting in tubes and things like that. And it was like, okay. So when it came time to make the decision, it was an easy choice to make because we were just honoring her choices, but she did not have an advance directive. And so then in 2016, I lost my oldest son, my firstborn son. He was murdered here in Milwaukee. And that was a very difficult, challenging experience for me, and just kind of going from the process of, one day being who you are to having no clue who you were anymore, because the things that were all connected with you having your children, you lose one, it changes the course of your life totally. And then a year later, my grandmother, she passed away. She was at the lovely age of 90, had the experience of being able to bring her home on hospice and allowing her, that well overdue privilege of being able to die at home. So 3 deaths, 3 different experiences, 3 different perspectives for me. And what I kind of took away from that was that death can be beautiful, but it can also be very traumatic. And depending on what, when, why, and how that ends up looking, but then also how we end up processing those different experiences and being able to kind of move into that space of grief, if we can actually move into that space of grief, dealing with how we actually lost that person. So after my grandmother died, and my son, it was like I wanted to start talking to people about like the value of life insurance and advance directives. And I originally was like, I just want to, like work with people and try to get them to understand like the value of these things, because my son, when we had a conversation a week before he was murdered that we should get him life insurance because he had a son. And it's just like, okay, like we should do this because, like one day, like when you die, so it was kind of like a poor man's inheritance type of, thought process. Like, when you get older and one day you die, it'd be nice to like leave your son something, behind. And so, he's like, yeah, I should. And like I said, a week later, he was gone. We didn't get a chance to follow up on that. So we were trying to figure out financially how to be able to bury him. So I started doing community education on the value of like advance directives and life insurance. But I noticed people really weren't showing up to it. But it was like one of those things of like, I wish I could just like work with people like one-on-one, kind of talk to them about these things so they can understand like how important this is and like, what they need to do, and understanding that it's not just related to someone getting older or someone being sick. It's something as simple as going to the grocery store can put you in a position where someone that cares for you has to make that decision for you. So my friends and I'm like talking to them about this, and I keep talking about it. And so they started sending me this video, and they were like, like I saw this video, you should really take a look at it. And I was like, okay, the second person was like, oh, I tagged you in this video. And I was like, okay, So by the time the third person actually tagged me in the video, I was like, well, let me look at this video and see what are people tagging me in. Because, there's some type of theme that's happening here because everybody keeps tagging me in this video. So I actually finally looked at the video, and I remember It was a little author, and she was sitting at a table with, it was a woman. She had 2 adult children, and it must have been like her grandchild kind of like in the background, like playing or carefree, like minding his business. And it was something about her, the woman, talking about like what her choices were and the things kind of related to death, and like sitting at this table having her adult children hear it from her, and then looking at that child in the background being carefree. And it was like, gosh, like the strength that it must have taken her to be able to share those things, in front of her children, and for them to hear them from her versus, wondering, questioning, and this child that's in the background that's like carefree and not having to carry like any of these burdens about these things. And then I remember her saying that she was a death doula. And I was like, what the hell is that? I'm like, is that a real thing? And I'm like, okay, like that's, never heard of that, but I want to be that. I want to do that. And I was like, but is that a real thing though? Like, did she just make this shit up? And then like, here we are, like, she just, okay, sure, this is what I'm going to call myself, and I'm just going to be it. And I was like, okay. So then I started like, of course, Google, the education center of the world. I'm like, Googling it, and I'm looking, and I'm like, this is actually a real thing. And I'm like, how do I do this? And so there's like these different programs that were out there, and they were available. There's online. There was one that was actually here in Wisconsin somewhere. But I ended up gravitating to one that I chose that I just felt like it was kind of perfect for me. So it was like, let's start this journey, to do this, because this is really what I want to do. So yeah, that's how I became a death doula.
It's a touching and beautiful path that you were on, and your 3 friends that really knew you and tagged you in that video. They were like, I think this is for you. How many people found out about end of life doulas from that video, right? Because what a great way to find out. I know we have somebody on here that went down a rabbit hole and pretty much, and the internet, and found the term end of life doula. And it was like, oh, what is that? That is what I want to be. That's what I've been wanting to be. I just didn't know it had a name.
Yes. So very real.
Definitely. It's poignant and touching and beautiful how those things kind of lined up. Yeah.
Yes.
What training, may I ask, did you take that spoke to you?
So I kind of looked around. I'm looking, at like cost, like how long is the training, like what are they offering in the training, and for me, it was really important because one, as people tell people, my day job is a nurse. And so like, I'm looking for like models, like care models and things like that. So I'm trying to figure out like, like where is this in alignment with things that I actually understand? And I ended up, like I said, gravitating to a training. It was through Lifespan Doula Association. And they had like birth and death doulas, it's like they were doing the spectrum is what I call it. And I chose them. One, the biggest reason why I chose them was, one, it was in person. 2, it was because of the fact that they kind of had more of a, what they refer to as a doula care model. So it was more of a holistic care model where it was like, like you have the client, but also everyone that surrounds the client, in this process all have, they all have value. They all play a part in this. So it's like, they also need to be considered as well. So I was like, this is the one. So I loaded up my grandson and my youngest son, and we took a road trip to Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we did this 3-day, super intense, training. And it was like the most, I don't even have a word other than magical right now to describe it, experience, because 25 of us, it was 25 of us in this space. And the diversity of the 25 of us that were in that space was totally amazing. It was people who worked in hospice, hospice volunteers, there were social workers, lawyers, physical therapists, speech therapists, massage therapists. And it was like, you know, from like all different like walks of life. And it was just like, so you walk in this room with strangers and then you walk out with the community. And it was like, wow, this is like amazing. And I just remember the setting, because like you walked into the space, it was kind of like, it was like a, a big ass living room pretty much. It was like there's sofas, there's chairs, it's like, and like some of us are like sitting on the floor like during like our lectures and stuff like that. And I was like, I love this space. I love this space to talk about like such a topic that's like so heavy, that it was a nurturing type of environment. So like to this day, I said, the creator willing that I create a space, I like that concept, because when there are things that are so uncomfortable for us to really truly talk about, to create an environment of comfort, to say, come like, welcome in, come on in, take your shoes off and let's get comfortable, because we're about to talk about some heavy, uncomfortable shit right now. So let's do that. And I will, yeah. And so after you the training literally approached you with how you felt about death and your relationship with death, and kind of like pulled that like wide open, and then started to like enter in like new information, different perspectives, adding tools to how to be able to approach these things and deal with them. And it was like, wow. And, like you're all like excited after you're done, and everything. And then all of a sudden day 3 rolls around and you're like, whew, that was really heavy. So, and they told us like at the end of our training, like, like you are going to want to take a little bit of time to kind of sit with, all the information that you received before you decide to move in on that information, which was very true. So I thought I was all super gung-ho and excited, like, and I was like, and I created this business, and in the midst of that, it was like I started a death cafe, because I found that when I was going down and looking for a doula, this concept rabbit hole. So then here I am facilitating death cafes and everything. But it's, yeah, so that training was it was an amazing 3-day, soul like clenching, touching, opening experience. And like, I'm grateful for it, because I get to take that approach into the people that I interact with.
Thank you for sharing your experience with Lifespan. I haven't heard somebody review that yet, and I really appreciate all the detail that you gave.
Okay.
I love myself a good room where you can kick off your shoes and settle into work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. I think the same way about my therapy room, right? When anyone comes in, I want people to feel comfortable enough to be like, this is the work we're doing. I can spread out and I can have some tea and kick off my shoes, and everyone's comfortable however you want to be.
Yes.
Also, really standing out to me that I have not heard yet is family therapist, we work systemically, that you're interested in that care model piece where we're not islands, right?
Right.
All the people around us, as we're dying, as our loved ones are dying, this is a system. And even the doctors, the nurses.
Yes.
People live in assisted living, the staff. This is the whole piece.
Yes.
Loving that piece. I have not heard somebody bring that up as an important piece yet. So I'm putting a gold star there, and people should be listening to that. So you get out of this training and you take a moment for some self-care and some self-reflection, it sounds like, because it's heavy. What happens then? Yes. What happens then? How do you get to this? What are the challenges of?
Challenge number 1, people do not know you exist. As it's interesting, because as like we are like having these discussions and we find our people in our spaces, typically it's fellow, other doulas, midwives, whatever the terminology that they actually use, then that's fine. But like getting yourself into spaces outside of the community and people knowing that you exist, is probably the biggest challenge, because I know I still hear it to this day. People are like, how do they get in contact with you? How do they find you? Because I'm like, how many people are actually really just sitting here doula and, with the Google, like, let me find a death doula. Let me, I think I need one of those. And it's just kind of like, if you don't really know how and what they do, they actually even exist. It's like, how can you find them? How would you connect with them? So it's such a void to be able to make that connection. But I'm learning now, kind of as I'm navigating, because this has been, I think I'll be 3 years. I will be a death doula, I think, in August, 3 years. And so that I'm starting to learn that there are spaces that you need to put yourself into to get into alignment. So one, knowing that, we exist. The other challenge that I see, that I was already seeing before becoming a death doula, when it comes down to like the medical profession, that the concept is to save. It is to not, allow someone to die. And because death equals failure, I feel that they make that relationship, that if the person dies, that they failed that person. And what gets missed in all of that is that there's this thing called quality of life. And because of the mission becomes to save the person, we miss giving that person an opportunity to have a quality of life in that process, and giving them the freedom to choose that, versus let's go. I had my last client, we had the first conversation we started talking about was the war mentality. You got to fight, you fight. And I'm like, okay, very challenging mentality. I said, because of the fact that if someone told you you had to go to war into a totally different country and you knew nothing about your adversary, you knew nothing about who you were going against. They know a little bit, but they don't know a lot, but they send you out here to fight against what you're not really knowing if you're really equipped to do all these things. How do you do all these things to win? I said, and then you have to have someone who is victorious and someone has to lose, someone has to fall. So that gives you the mentality that you're thinking like, I have to win. And if I don't win, then I'm a failure, and I've fallen. So I don't want to be the person that looks like I've fallen. So you go into this fight not fully prepared, not fully knowing what you're up against. You just know that you need to fight it and win. That's it. So when we're looking at your opponent being cancer, we know things, but we don't know everything. So to go into it with this mentality that you feel, like I said, you see sometimes people read like in obituaries and comments, they lost their, like their fight against cancer. And it's like, I see that and I cringe, because it's like, no, like it took the strength for a person to say yes to do the treatment the same way it would take the strength of a person to say no. So we have to kind of shift like the mindsets of thinking, medical, advancements have created, kind of like a monster when it comes down to death, like death is the adversary. And it's just like, does it have to be? Like really, does it have to be? Can we really try to rethink, and reapproach that to knowing that this is part of the life process? Everyone doesn't have the, this long, like I constantly tell people, you're born and then you die. So in the middle, you can have this much time or this much time. But what matters is what we do with that time that we have. So to start looking at it from a quality of life perspective, then to really be putting it like, this fight against to win something, like, so I have to fight for my life, like, why not just be able to live your life? So shifting like that mindset, the thinking that we have to always fight to the very, very end of something, and allowing people to choose to live, until the end of something. So changing that, shifting that mindset is another challenge, because, this is what we're being socially conditioned to think this way, versus, like, let's rethink this, and not saying just not choose to do anything, but like have the other side of that conversation with them, saying, okay, this is what's going to happen. How do you feel about if these are the side effects? How do you feel about that? I had a client, I said, well, if you choose to do treatment, ask them, would your provider, would they be supportive if you decided to stop? And what would that look like? So you can ask that question. So it's challenging a lot of the traditional old mindsets about things. What else I find is it's challenging. So those are like the two biggest things for me.
Quick question. Do you
Sure.
believe your position as a nurse, or is it an advantage for helping change the system?
I do believe so. I really do. And that's one of the reasons why there was that underlying intention of wanting, because I could have easily went into hospice. I'm a nurse. I could have just become a hospice nurse, like truthfully. And so if that's if that was just really to be in that type of space, but it was more about really having the ability to truly connect with people on such a vulnerable level and having that continuity in that relationship versus, I come in for an hour visit, or I come in and do an assessment, and then maybe a little talk here and there, and then I'm out, but I get to meet you where you are and I get to follow you through the whole process. And not only do I get to follow you through the process, I get to come in contact with everyone who is connected with you in the process. So then when you do depart, I continue to work with them as part of that process. So it doesn't end, like we're continuing that part of that process. So I like having pretty much the freedom and the ability to be able to determine what the relationship with my clients looks like based upon their needs and not being navigated by, I'm going to say being controlled by, organizations and policies and politic things like that. So I prefer that. I prefer to have, them to determine what the relationship looks like versus someone telling me what it's supposed to look like. But being able to come into spaces, like having, access sometimes to providers and things like that, to be able to kind of plant that seed, like, hey, like, yeah, so she doesn't want hospice, and I'm like, well, has anybody really talked to her about hospice and explaining to her really what hospice is? Because people right now think that hospice is the automatic death sentence. And I'm like, it is so far from it. But it takes someone that they have a rapport and a relationship with, to talk to them about, like, this is what they are, this is what they do, and this is how they can help you. So, but people think that it just means you're knocking on death's door or you've given up the fight. And now you show up at hospice. Like, people go to hospice and they die. I'm like, no, because people typically arrive at the door a little too late. Mm-hmm. So if you can start this relationship early with them, you can receive the benefits and the connection. I said, they will become invested in you and what you need. And it's a totally different perspective. And so, yeah, so it's a lot of that, like, let's have some real conversations and talk about this in a real way, and meeting people where they are and helping them understand what that can actually look like. So, yeah, I feel like it does. And I kind of was aware of that when I got into the space, but it's more, because like to ask that question, to say, well, why don't you ask your provider, like, what would that look like would you support me if I decided to stop? If I had said, this is enough, I said, where is your line in the sand? And the thing is, it's sand, it's always movable. So you can start here today and next week you can change that and move that line. So it's okay. But to be able, and then like I tell them, my day job is a nurse, but sometimes it slides in, little things, but still putting them in the space of control and navigating what they need to do.
As much as I want to kind of fight the system, the bureaucracy of medicalization, when it comes to being a licensed nurse, it brings authority. Saying my end-of-life doula is a registered nurse and she's helping me with X, Y, and Z brings some authority to this medical conversation that we're having, right? That the
Yes.
medical system needs to hear that there's people on all the sides that are saying we need non-medical care at end of life as well as medical care. and there's
Yes.
other perspectives, and we're going to listen to the humans in front of us.
Yes. Yes.
And so my hope, this isn't my podcast, and I'm not going to answer my hopes on this, but my hope is that it is an advantage that you are a registered
Mhm.
nurse and an end-of-life doula, because I
Yes.
want it to work. I guess that's why, but
Yes.
if we can, we're just kind of cracking the ice just a little and watching it crack. And sometimes
really
authority
is.
matters. And so
Yes.
a doula, right, is a lawyer that does this work.
Yes.
And
Yes.
right, and there's some morticians that do this work, and there's some social workers that do this work.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I want to use their authority to crack the ice. I don't think anyone has to have a license or, certifications or anything else. I think this is community care. Again, this isn't
Yes,
my podcast.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I'm hoping, you're like, Mitzi, shush. But I just think that this is cracking the ice. And when I saw Shantell, the reason that I reached out to you to be part of this podcast, because I was like, oh, we have a registered nurse that does this. And I was like, I have a feeling that this is a good thing. And that if we can all work together, we're all cracking that ice a little bit faster and harder.
Yes. Yes.
So good. All right. So my favorite part of this series, what are your hopes for end-of-life doulas? The business, your business?
The hope is that people utilize us, connect with us. The hope is that a space starts to open for us within the medical side, and not doing medical work, but understanding comprehensively for the person that we're part of that team. We can be part of that team. I love the concept of being able to meet a person from the time that they get a life-limiting diagnosis, like I said, and following through with being able to support their support team. And like I tell people, support team doesn't necessarily always have to mean family. It's the people who care for you, love you, and support you. So I like to pull away from family titles and roles and dynamics and things like that. So like even when I talk about advanced directives, it doesn't automatically, your power of attorney doesn't automatically have to be your oldest child. It does not automatically have to be the daughter. It does not automatically have to be your spouse. So you want someone who can advocate for you and be able to follow through with your wishes. That might just be your best friend, So take offense, do not take offense, daughter, husband, partner, whatever. This goal is because you will probably be so emotionally invested in that person that the minute someone offers you and says, well, if we do this could probably buy them some more time. And of course, you love them so much that you'll do anything. So to be able to pull that back and say, that's not what they wanted, and be able to follow through with that, not coming into an emotional space with it. So like removing that, the titles and the roles like that, and just knowing that this is your support team and who is your support team, and understanding that they're going to need that too. So being able to continue to educate people. Like I tell people, you need to be consumers in death the same way you're consumers in life. Like we buy cars. We don't just go to the car lot and they tell us what they want us to have. We go in with our mind already made up, like, this is what I need. This is what I'm looking for. This is my budget. Why not go to the funeral home and saying, this is the idea, this is what I want, and this is my budget, and not offer me something in the most vulnerable, emotional space that I'm going to be in at that moment, and offer me all of these things that I don't necessarily need. Because yes, at the end of the day, it's a business, So of course, just like the person who's selling you the car, they're going to want you to get all the bells and whistles, it adds to their commission. So it's like, they're getting a benefit from that. But yes, like, I am a big, strong believer, of letting yourself be a consumer in death, taking those steps, being proactive, having the conversations early, and utilizing when you're uncomfortable, utilizing a doula to help you navigate those conversations, learning about what you desire, what you want, what you fear, what your concerns are, and being able to be able to learn how to verbalize that. So because you can't, then you don't, and then the family never has the conversation. So being able to kind of like get into that part with that person and talk about this and saying, hey, this is what they want, this is what they desire, and you're hearing it, but being supported from someone, not just feeling like it's only me saying this and everybody's gonna be like, but dad or mom, why do you want this? Why you don't want that? It's just like, no. And I get to mediate all of that and tell them, well, this is something that they chose. And because of this, blah, 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 so we can walk away with not necessarily all full agreement, but at least better understanding, and be able to respect and honor that. So yes, utilize us, find us, and changing the death culture of thinking that death is like, it's separate from the life continuum, understanding that death can be beautiful and it also can be traumatic, and being able to meet a person in any of those spaces to offer support. And just the fact that, we allow us to be human, allow people to be humans in this experience of dying, and remembering that they had a life to be able to continue to live and have a quality of life until that time, making them accessible to resources, making things accessible to people who don't have the resources to do that is super, super important. I'm getting ready to start a grief support fund that I'm grassrooting, because I've been working with mothers in grief support and bereavement through infant loss, perinatal loss, and different meeting people in different spaces for grief support. And one of the things that I am starting to find out is that everybody doesn't have access to grief. And it's something that I've been doing like this probably for about over a year now, and starting to see that the common theme is that everybody doesn't have the same resources to access grief. And be it, if it's family dynamics, like now I'm pulling in social determinants of health, because these are the factors, and they really are the factors of how grief is being inaccessible to them. And there's the connection of like work performance. And I'm like, you know what? I am about to start raising money. I want to raise money to be able to help people remove some of the barriers so they can access their grief. Because right now we are collectively grieving as a world right now, and the things that we're adding with these experiences is creating more of a barrier for us to be able to function in everyday life. So I decided, I said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I will have no shame in the game. This is going to be a community effort, because people need it. And this is a community thing, and so why not ask the community to support people in this process? And so I am deciding to grassroots this and ask people for money so we can one day give people access to me and other people who need that. I would love to see it one day if you were offsetting a single parent's rent, offsetting someone's bills, so they don't have to feel the pressure of having to return back to work right away when they have not even begun to process what has happened with them, and thinking that they're going to come to work and be a performance person. And it's so many different layers and so many different levels, but I am like, you know what? I'm here for it. I started creating a survey that I'm asking these questions because I want to know. I need to know. And this supports and confirms why I need to do this work. So yeah, that's my hope.
Those are great hopes. That's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, Shantell Riley, but they're going to find you on Instagram and Facebook, Dignity with Departure. All those links are in the show notes below. And also, when you have that fund up and running, I'm going to put that link in there.
Yes.
Yes, we're doing this. You're in it. I'm in it with you. Let's do this.
I love it. Thank you.
Midwest people. That's what we do.
Midwest the best. Yes.
Thank you so much, Shantell. Thank you to all the listeners that are listening to this podcast. It would mean the world to us if you like or subscribe or leave a comment on YouTube. It tells us to make more conversations about ethical end-of-life care, because it is important and we should do this. And then it's also hopefully entertaining, and we're also a little weird, and that's fine too. And then, of course, go to Patreon and become a patron, because you get cool shit. Thanks again, and we will see you all in the next episode.